I was very much amazed at how St. Paul had grown over the years from a little church in the downtown area of Charlotte, being supported by the maids who worked in the Myers Park neighborhood and other neighborhoods. Many of them were like my mother, who after working, they received hand-me-down clothes versus $1 bill. But when it comes to supporting St. Paul, they brought their money to St. Paul. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about St. Paul. St. Paul, of course, has been a great part of my life for a long time. I learned of St. Paul while I was in Germany in the military, and I came to Charlotte, North Carolina, March of 1954. And at that point, I met my future wife, who was a junior usher at the St. Paul Baptist Church. My mother and two sisters were also members of St. Paul at that time. I joined in April and hit the ground running, not so much because I wanted to, but because I was asked to. St. Paul was a country church, and everyone was sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, uncles, cousins. And so you had always be careful who you talked about and what you said around St. Paul. And I suspect that even today, much of that is still true. After joining St. Paul, I became a member of the Finance Receiving Committee that handled the funds on Sunday. And immediately after that, I became a clerk at St. Paul Baptist Church. This was under the pastoralship of Dr. James F. Wirtz. I was a part of the officers of the church by the time we were issued a document that said we had to move from that location because of the urban renewal that was taking place in that area. That disturbed our membership considerably. And many of them decided that they wanted to move, knowing we had to. Some decided to move to a location over in the West Charlotte area. And some of us decided to move to the Belmont, North Charlotte area. Dr. Wirtz made it very clear that he wanted to relocate to a location that was similar to 515 South McDowell, where we were at that time. It was the area around First Street in McDowell was known as Murderer's Corner. There was a murder there almost every weekend, and he felt that the church was needed in an area like that, and he had enough foresight to believe that Allen Street, the new location that was introduced to us, would be a similar location needing the kinds of services that St. Paul would be able to foster. We moved to relocate in 1969. I became a deacon at the St. Paul Baptist Church on Allen Street in January of 1970. After being ordained, I was asked to take a position of trustee and prepare to handle much of the properties in the neighborhood of St. Paul there on Allen Street. Those properties had been located and occupied by people who belonged to the former Allen Street Baptist Church, and much of that property was run down, really not fit to live in a lot of it. So St. Paul started buying properties as it become available. My friend and deacon, Roy Tolliver, and I had talked a long time about building housing for those who could not afford it. And so with the purchase of those properties came very much in view of being able to do that at some point in the future. Today, that has happened. I was asked to come downtown and meet with the city officials who handle the properties of Mecklenburg County. And all they wanted to know was, what are you all planning to do with all that property in your purchasing? I had some interesting occasions personally as a representative of St. Paul. My first was having 2 federal marshals to come to my office looking for Bobby Lowery. I said, this is he. He said, we're with the Federal Justice Department, and we want to issue you an order to appear in the federal courts of Jackson, Mississippi, in the trial of Medgar Evers. What I found out was later that St. Paul had made a contribution to the Medgar Evers campaign, and the federal government had charged him with the misappropriation of campaign funds. I immediately called my lawyer and asked him, did I have to go? He said, yes, you've got to go. So I prepared to make my trip to Jackson, Mississippi to participate in the trial of Medgar Evers. I made a second trip to Jackson, Mississippi at a date much later for the purpose of attending a gathering by a ministerial group there. There was 5 of us from St. Paul: Zach Alexander, Annie Rose Poole, and several of us. Spent a week there, learned an awful lot. And a lot of what we learned was what we tried to come back to St. Paul and put some of that into play. One of them was looking at what they were doing with the funds that they have and with the resources they had. That went very well in Mississippi. It went very well when we applied it at St. Paul on Allen Street. We were ordered to meet with county officials again on the properties because, number one, they weren't receiving any funds as a result of the properties that the church was purchasing, and we weren't paying any taxes as being God's church. So as a result of that, we continued to put together a plan that would help St. Paul not only build housing for people who could afford housing in that area on Allen Street, and we were fortunate to have helped some people relocate out of the Belmont area into better housing. I was very much amazed at how St. Paul had grown over the years from a little church in the downtown area of Charlotte, being supported by the maids who worked in the Myers Park neighborhood and other neighborhoods who could afford them some monies. Many of them were like my mother, who after working, they received hand-me-down clothes versus a dollar bill. But when it comes to supporting St. Paul, they brought their money to St. Paul, and we were able to work our way out of not being able to pay the oil man to having a decent facilities for the increasing membership. St. Paul, from the time I've been aware of it, has always wanted to move forward to provide for the needy and to have a church where everybody was welcome. And I think we pretty much had come to that. And it was there with Reverend Wertz, it was there with Reverend Drummond, it was there with Reverend Moss, and we hope for today is there with Dr. Scott. Thank you.